Now, what you've all been finally waiting for is the introduction of the inimitable Scot Meacham Wood. There's a great chance you already know Scot from his long-running blog, The Adventures of Tartan Scot, or from his constantly updated Instagram feed, or his many appearances on videos or podcasts, or, well, in pre-COVID days anyway, at conferences and market events, where I'm sure many of you have had the chance to chat and perhaps drink with him. He is a very busy boy. Although thoroughly American in his upbringing, as a designer, Scot has evolved a sort of Balmoral Castle meets California casual look. That is traditional British style modernized and made a bit more playful for contemporary American living. Scot's gradually built a persona and a brand that encompasses many aspects of living beautifully, an interior design business, of course, but also an online shop, Scot Meacham Wood Home, complete with lines of furniture, accessories, textiles, and other goodies. Not to mention an eye-popping line of men's trousers that has been so popular that unfortunately pre-orders are closed for the moment, but I think you should still check them out on his website for future reference, because I'm sure orders will open up again someday in the post-COVID future. And just this year, of all years to pick, after decades as a fixture in the Bay Area, Scot has made the momentous hop over here to the East Coast and is now set up in New York City. So, Scot, why don't we talk a little bit about your background and upbringing, and just to get started, and maybe how your style world evolved from where you came from, or didn't, as the case may be.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's a beautiful day in New York today, and I'm excited to share some time with y'all. My upbringing was strange, kind of epically strange. My father was American military, so I grew up very kind of delightfully internationally. I think when I started the 6th grade, I had been in 8 schools. So we lived in South Korea and in Japan. We lived in Southern Florida. I was born in Canada. We lived in Los Angeles for 2 years. But after that, my father retired from the military, and then we moved back to what is classically the family land, which is this acreage in kind of central Mississippi. So we moved from Los Angeles to Mississippi when I was in the 6th grade. So all of the kind of endless, I don't want to rag on Mississippi, but it's, you know, it's not Los Angeles. So there's that. So my upbringing, and it's strange. It's strange when I look at some of my product now, especially I've got a few things to show you that we're launching this season. There are things that feel very classic Southern. There are influences that are strongly chinoiserie and based on the years that I lived in Japan. I mean, I can almost draw a through line from things that I do and things that I'm inspired by to some point in my location history. In many cases, I did not grow up in England, which people often think that I did, which is perfectly fine. I mean, I'll accept that. But my family is from the northeast coast of Scotland, so it is in the blood. It is part of my heritage.
Well, as you can see, in your honor today, I wore the closest thing to plaid I have, which is not very close, but it'll have to do. Yeah, well, so, I mean, over time, how did you get more involved in the whole Scottish background and the Scottish look? You know, just did it sort of boom full blown right from the beginning, or is it something that you gradually dove into and learned more about?
I think like any aspect of your upbringing, it doesn't feel special to you at the time because it's just like it didn't feel special to me that we lived all over the world because everybody that I knew lived all over the world. Those are the kids that I was with on the base school in Korea. We all had lived someplace strange. So it's kind of hard to know when I realized that it was a thing. It was not just.
I know you spent quite a long time with Ralph Lauren. And so
Yes.
obviously there's kind of a connection there. You know,
Yes.
is that why you went there, or did that just kind of help bring out the Scottishness in your background?
I think it was, I think it, I know that it existed before I got there. I was built to work for Ralph Lauren at some stage of the game. Um, so I can't blame it on Ralph. But it was certainly a marvelous environment to experiment. And I mean, I was there when we did the Scottish Highland collection in the fall of 1990. And I helped I helped install that. And that was fun. Um, so it's not as though this is all wrought from Ralph, but like I said, I was a good fit for Ralph from the beginning. I got hired at the store in San Jose while I was living in Colorado. I'd flown out and interviewed and got the job and flew back and put everything in my car and drove to California and started my job like 6 days later. Like it was like, and my big fear at the time was, and I remember verbalizing this out loud, like it was all I had ever wanted was to work for Ralph Lauren. So I'm like, what's going to happen if I get here and it's horrible? What if they beat us with sticks every day? Like, what if it's a nightmare? So I was a little trepidatious before I started because I'm like, this is all I have ever talked about doing. And so I had better love this.
Right, put up or shut up, right?
Kind of. Luckily, it was an amazing experience. I mean, it's a job like every other job, and there are good days and bad days. But it was such a great place to learn my current job as a designer. Like I'm also like, you're also a salesperson. You've got things to show and things to sell, and we're exchanging money, and I mean, there is a very strong sales aspect to that part of my design job.
Mm-hmm.
So good Lord, I learned that at Ralph Lauren. I learned
Yeah.
how to show product, how to talk about product. We always used the fancy word. It was never couch, it was always a sofa. There were never curtains, there were always drapes. It was never, a dress shirt, it was furnishings. They were never shoes, they were footwear. And I kind of learned in many ways the kind of the power of that language while I was there, and how to give something an elevated sense of worth and quality that you might not assume just looking at it.
Right.
And then that was the first couple of years I was on the sales floor. And then I transitioned to a division called Creative Services. And Creative did all the windows and dressed all the mannequins and did all the home collection setups and worked with the caterers and worked with the florists and dealt with the plant people. And so I mean, for my current job as a designer, like my sense of kind of project management, I learned in those 10 years of we have to change the entire sales floor of the Palo Alto store in 6 days.
Wow.
And we did it 3 times a year. Or we've got to put in Christmas in 6 stores. So we have 4 weeks. So we're going to divide up this way. And you get the van today, and you are going to use the van tomorrow, and you're going to go here and hang wreaths and whatever the mechanics of it was. Oh my God, I can hang a wreath like nobody's business. But
doing plenty of installs before the event.
right. So, I love it. I love a drop dead date with a client. I love that we've got a party on, January the 3rd. I like that will get that. That always gets all of it done, which is great.
Right.
I like kind of working not under a deadline, but you kind of need a deadline to get it all done.
Right. Well, and it gives the product it gives the project a sense of real kind of conclusion and unveiling, and maybe
right.
Gives the clients a great memory if this is sort of the first thing that happens in their new place.
And we love that first tour, and everybody cries. I mean, it's magical.
That's great.
If they didn't cry, we didn't do it. Then we failed somehow, because it's got to be. It's so funny when I look back at my career. I've been doing design work for almost 20 years. It's always fascinating to me when people reach out to a designer, because clearly they're ready for a change in their life. I mean, it's not a casual decision to redecorate your house.
Right.
And then, from our point of view, what we do is so incredibly invasive. because I am up in all of your business. I know your financials. I know what's in the side drawer of your dresser. Like we know everything. We got
Right. I think many designers would prefer to call that intimate rather than invasive, but I know exactly
all
what
right.
you
Well,
mean.
it's semantic. It's so funny. I was doing a project in East Hampton years ago, and I was talking, and this was probably the fourth or fifth project I'd done for this family, and I made the wife we were kind of hanging artwork. I'm like, well, I'll hang this by your side of the bed, and she's like, what's my side of the bed? I'm like, that one. Like, am I driving this? Have I put you over there because that's where I think you want to sleep?
Well,
She's like, oh no, I
maybe
guess it is
that's
my
part
side of
of
the
the
bed.
new life thing, you know?
Maybe so. I'm like, have you ever wanted to sleep on the other side? Like, I don't care. Like it's, and some of those are those very intimate questions that we have to ask people about how they live in their house. So it's kind of back to my point. Like I'm always fascinated when someone reaches out to me, like what the impetus is for their wanting to change the way that they live, because that's what I need to react to.
Right.
Either they've just gotten engaged, or they've just changed jobs, or they just have lived in, a basic apartment for 10 years, and now we want to make it a fabulous apartment.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting place in someone's life to be involved in.
Absolutely. Well, that actually brings up another question to my mind, which is, how did you discover the transition that you wanted to make from working in retail, even in the creative services part of it, to actually wanting to interact with real people and change things in their lives?
The funny thing, we laughed about this at Ralph all the time. Of all the giant warehouse to props, all the giant, the van full of artwork and books and whatever they were, none of that had any emotional value. Mm-hmm. If the artwork above the fireplace didn't fit because it was too big, then we would just use something else. So they turned into a lot of just we were just kind of moving nouns around. I mean, it was beautiful, and in some ways it was easier because nothing had any emotional value to it. Because we would use what we used, and if something got broken, we'd throw it away. But dealing with clients where everything has such intense emotional value, it's a real fascinating way of doing the same job and being an active participant in creating these people's lives. But we have to use that sofa. That's their grandmother's sofa. So I have got to figure out a way to make it work because we're gonna use it. So it has so much more kind of emotional resonance as we work with things like that than just pulling stuff out of the warehouse to put in a window. As much fun as that was, and it was, I swear to God, I worked at the Palo Alto store and just south of San Francisco for almost 10 years. I think I saw the sunrise in that store dozens of times. I'm like, oh my God, the store opens in an hour and a half. We've got to finish this room. Right. I like that. I like that kind of frantic middle of the night deadline where we just like, okay, that didn't work. What's here in the store? What's in the back of my car? What can we steal out of a window? Well, we've got to find a piece of artwork for above the fireplace because the thing we bought for it doesn't fit.
Yeah. So, well, it's interesting that you should mention that kind of difference in meaning between the retail and the actual clients, because quite a few years ago, there was a really fun and interesting article in The Atlantic, I think it was, that was called Ralph Lauren's Achievement. And it came out just after he had opened the big store in the mansion on the Upper East Side.
Right.
And it talked about exactly that aspect of things, that, there was this attempt to kind of make this huge, essentially grand home. And it was all real, but it was all manufactured for a purpose. And so by achievement, they meant actually they had gone so far as to create a coat of arms for Ralph Lauren brand and the store. And so the writer of this article actually analyzed the coat of arms from an armorer's point of, from the herald's point of view, and made clear that it actually made no sense in terms of heraldry, but it was perfect for the brand and for the look and feel that they were trying to convey. And so it's interesting for me that you kind of made that transition sort of from the style part without some of the inner substance into working with real people and
And
really
real things.
and real things and kind of putting them together to make a whole, which is basically a lifestyle as we're talking about today, in a sense.
Right. But interestingly, so we're looking at this picture. This is an entryway of a house in Pacific Heights that I finished a couple years ago. And the wife was very much into like 1950s Hollywood. And her husband was like a rock and roller. So you'll notice in this big kind of cast of images going up the stairs, it's Marilyn Monroe, it's Mick Jagger, it's the Beatles, it's Ella Fitzgerald, it's also Joan Crawford. We had such fun kind of curating that collection of art for that space that would represent both of them. And then that beautiful ancestral portrait that's on an easel there on the dresser. We bought that at an antique show. I don't know who the hell that is. Like, so there's still some artifice sometimes. Like it doesn't.
But it's nice that you could do it in a subtle way that actually is integrated. It's not you did like a giant Hollywood Regency house with motorcycles or something like that.
Right, and it's a classical San Francisco house from the 1920s. It was actually once a foreign consulate. So the whole main floor was all big framed openings, and everything open. And the sight line across the entire width of the house, you could stand at one end and see the entire other end of the house, because it was really built to entertain in, and they were huge entertainers. Big Oscar parties, big New Year's Eve parties, big 4th of July parties in the garden. So I like that this house, it was built for such a different purpose. It was such a nice fit for them while they were there.
Well, one of the things that has always impressed me about your work is that you managed to take design elements that I think could seem a little stuffy in the wrong hands, like Boston ferns and dark plaids and King Charles spaniels and ginger jars everywhere. But you managed to infuse them with a more kind of colorful, playful, somewhat overscale sensibility. Is that something that you just kind of do by nature, or are you kind of intentional about that kind of thing?
Some of it's kind of my southernness. I mean, those are all also very classic parts of classic Southern design. So that may be where some of it comes from. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'd love to tell you that I've got, this quadratic equation of what we use different percentages of. I'd like to tell you that it's math, and it's not. It's just things that I like. And I mean, when push comes to shove, I'm almost always going to lean toward color, even if it's intense dark color. I like when color is an adjective that describes my work.
Right.
I think, and part of it came from being at Ralph for way too long. My love of mixing pattern and textiles always delights me, and Ralph was always so great at that, especially back in the kind of late 80s, early 90s, which is when I'd first started there. So those things I've kind of extrapolated those out, and they're part of my current aesthetic. But
well, I love the fact that you do use colors, and you don't shy away at all often from some quite dark tones, which is a wonderful break from the I guess you'd call it the epidemic of whiteness that has overtaken Instagram in recent years. And sometimes it's rather somber tones and a lot of brown furniture, and yet you make them lively and fun, and there's nothing oppressive about the place at all. So.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. If anyone had ever described my work as oppressive, we would have a duel at dawn. That's not my goal. I'd like to think our design work is fun. I like to think that our design process is fun. It is probably not either of those all the time because it is work. But I'd like a real kind of joie de vivre to our rooms. And we've done some very, like the space we looked at before, the one from Pacific Heights, which was a very limited palette. We stretched all the way from like dove gray to taupe, and that was the entire palette for the entire house. But we still, I think, made it impactful with the way the furniture was laid out, the way the artwork was laid out. Some of the small, it's kind of fun in those very tightly paletted rooms because like one little detail, one giant arrangement of forsythia next to the fireplace is going to just slap you in the face when you walk in the room because there's so little else going on color wise.
Right.
So that's a fun way of playing with, or even having a couple of books with a yellow spine on them on the
Yeah.
cocktail table. I mean, it doesn't. I like sometimes those really tight color projects are more fun because you don't have to make a big gesture to get anything to get some impact. It can be the tiniest little gesture. This is a trim on a pillow or a reverse on a drape.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a merchandising way of thinking about things, but it also reminds me very much of, photo styling work, where you are often putting together these little tiny color harmonies and knitting them around the room.
Right.
And so, in whatever the accessories or the flowers or the books, as you say, there'll be like 3 little pops of red that make the place sing, or 3 bits of yellow, or, something like that.
When we were doing windows at Ralph, not to take it back to that, but there's this one of the best things I learned there from my old boss, Michael. And so we'd be doing the windows in San Francisco, which are these giant windows that are the corner of Post and Kearny, a big thoroughfare. It's a big shopping district.
Hmm.
And he's like, I want someone, he's like, we would stand outside, in the middle of the day and watch to see if someone across the street would stop to look at the windows from across the street.
Nice.
And then we would always wait to see if someone would cross the street to see them closer. And so kind of the thing that we talked about was we need to make sure that it's impactful, that it's a thing, it's a story. You can see it from across the street in a car going 40 miles an hour down Post Street, and it would make an impact on you. But if we drew you in enough to come see it more closely, we have to reward you. There's got to be some little something in the window, some little tiny detail that you can only see from right in front of it to make your trip across the street worth it.
Right.
And I feel that way about our design work as well. I always see the room from the doorway, and like, what are you going to see when you walk in here? But I also think that somebody who is delighted by the work in the room, if they go all the way into it, I need to make sure there's another level of detail that they can only see close up.
Right. And from inside, you also are looking in all different directions. And so the design has to work there also.
Right.
And
It
not
can't
just from the door.
look good from I'm sorry, you have to stand right here. It's a running joke. People ask me about going to Scotland. Like, what do I need to go? I said, the great thing about Scotland is practically all of Scotland is Scotland. You can close your eyes and spin around and just take a picture, and it's going to be Scotland. Because the entire nation of Scotland is Scotland. So I hope our design work does the same things.
Yeah, well, I mean, that can be an issue, I know, for any of our audience who have gone to design show houses, is occasionally, not the really good designers, obviously, but occasionally designers at those will do an amazing picture from the door. And
Right.
then you walk in and suddenly half of it doesn't work anymore.
Because there's nothing on that left wall, or there's just like a gesture when it needs like a commanding something. Yeah.
Right. And so it was done for the New York Times photographer who was going to be coming to the door and going snap, snap, and then moving on in a way.
I'm very, when we're working on showcase houses, the thing I always have to remember, I mean, there are going to be whatever, a couple thousand people who are going to see it in person, who are going to walk through and see it.
Yeah.
But the main kind of outlet for those rooms is in the press, it's in the magazine, it's in the newspaper. So we always, I always make sure that we have built a picture, because I need that picture to be amazing, because that's going to get more traction sometimes than the house does itself. I would not ignore parts of the room because it was not going to be in the picture. But there's a certain aspect of planning the photography, like where are we going to take the picture? Let's make sure this is amazing.
Right.
And we can do something, and the rest of the room can be amazing as well. But like, this has to be fantastic, because this is what the bulk of our audience is going to see.
Yeah, well, that's actually a perfect segue, I think, for your momentous trek over here to the East Coast, now that you are firmly ensconced in Harlem.
Yes.
Because I don't know if it was by happenstance or if it was part of a carefully calculated plan, but you did actually a room at this year's Hamptons Designer Show House for Cottages and Gardens, which I believe is actually up on the web right now.
It is.
Tour, and also is in their current print issue.
It is.
You want to talk a little bit about that? Is that an example of what you were just saying?
That was, and not to give you, not to like burst everybody's bubble, it was incredibly calculated. Because I am known as a West Coast designer. I was known as a San Francisco designer, and now I'm not anymore.
Right. Although this is the first Hampton show house you've done. You've done at least one other one, right?
We did one, I think 5 years ago, because time is now just, I'm untethered from the calendar, so I don't know, when anything is.
Right.
But we kind of plotted this so that we would have a really nice East Coast magazine issue that shows that we're here. I was very intentional about talking about the fact that we had just moved to New York. So it's a great way of showing, at times, showing new product, showing you're in a new venue. Like those showcase houses can be incredibly productive. More so than just the design of it, which is also incredible. Like if you do a really crappy room in a new location, it's gonna do you more harm than good. But if you can use a new location to show maybe some part of your work that maybe nobody knows you know how to do, or that is not something that people would be expecting from you, but you've always wanted to do, or you've got, the picture up there on the screen now was our showcase house from last fall from High Point, which was the launch of our wallpaper collection, the launch of our furniture collection, new fabrics, some great partnerships with, Dunes and Duchess and replacements.com. So there's a lot of different reasons to do a showcase house. And the great thing about that one was because it was in High Point and it was during market last fall, like there were market events there. Like it was one of the best physically traveled showcase houses that I've ever been in contact with, because everyone saw it.
You had to drag the blue checks out of Mark Sykes's hands, right?
He's like tied up in the closet. He's got a gag in his mouth. He'll never know.
Well, that actually brings me a little bit, it's what you were saying about the show houses kind of letting you really do things that are personal to your vision that you might not get to do with clients. Kind of brings me a little bit to one of the things that was billed for today's talk, which was the idea that, in the recent years, and especially in 2020, as people are marooned in their own homes for such long periods of time, that personal style has become lifestyle. And what does that mean for you? I mean, how does your design work and your personal way of being in the world interact? Or did one grow out of the other? Do you think about that, or is it just an instinctive sort of thing?
I don't know that I think of them independently of one another, as like, this is my personal style and this is my design style, and those are two different Venn diagrams that may overlap at some point. At this point, it's so integrated that it all feels like it's all part of one thing. So I don't know that I have a real answer to that from that point of view. The only thing that I think about, I remember laughing with a client about this 20 years ago. I'm like, living a chic, stylish life can be your cardio. Like, it's work. Like
Right.
you have to make a conscious decision that we're going to use the good china, we're going to use the good linens, I'm going to iron the sheets once a week. Whatever that is that luxury and style means to you within your own home.
Right.
You have to do it. It has to be a conscious decision. So that's, I'm going to talk bad about my mom for a second, which I almost never do, because my mother was an amazing woman and took no crap from anyone, which is one of the things I learned. And she was very stylish and very chic, much more with her wardrobe than her interiors. So she was very bold in some of her interiors as well. But I just remember her doing things in our house that were like a gesture of an idea and not an entire idea. And it always frustrated me. Like, why didn't we, like, I'm going to make everybody mad. Like, I hate an accent wall because it just seems like you just didn't want to paint the whole room. And so we had tons of accent walls, and they just, oh my God, they bug me. Because it feels like a lack of commitment to something that you like.
Right.
So all you accent wall people can send the hate mail my way. And one of the great things about being at Ralph was and the work that I do now, I like taking an idea and like making just the most extravagant, extraordinary version of it. It's not my job to give my clients the room that they wanted. It's my job to find them what they didn't even know they could ask for.
Mm.
I mean, I need their specific needs is the seed of the idea. But I need to give them something that they would have never imagined they could live in, because that's my job. That's cardio. That's hard. That's work, because you can't just find the first sofa you find, because we need to dig through 30 or 40 of them until I find the perfect one.
Right.
So some of that. I've gotten so far
Yeah,
off.
so that is the answer. I mean, and yet at the same time, it needs to also, what you're giving them needs to go beyond their expectations and sometimes beyond what they would even imagine that they would be comfortable with.
Right.
And yet they do need to feel comfortable within it, and it needs somehow to click with their way of being.
I mean, this is a project we did in Vail a couple of years ago, and it's hard to storyboard that many fabrics. I think there's like 36 fabrics in that room. I mean, and of course you look at it and it all seems to hang together, but it's an enormous amount of trust from a client. I'm like, I'm gonna like take all of this, we're gonna make into a room. I promise, I swear. Because in some ways, the biggest part of that room, which you can't see, is the Rocky Mountains, which are what's right outside those windows.
Right.
And all the blue sky and all the kind of green landscape. So we made the entire room blue and green. It almost matches the exterior because there's very little other housing right in that area. But we've got, oh my God, I can't even think how many fabrics in that room. I think it was well over 30 by the time we really got down to it. And of course, there's another wall behind those chairs, which is a whole nother pile of nonsense. And there's another seating area, and this actually connects to another dining room as well. So I think clients give us such incredible trust. I mean, they approved all these fabrics, and we talked about everything. Very, very little happens in a house that we don't at least have discussed with our clients. I'm not one of those. I don't like a big surprise. I think the surprise is that this is what it looks like corporeally, not just fabrics pinned on a board.
Well, and one of the really masterful things for a room like this that only the best designers, I think, get right all the time is that all of these bits and pieces have to harmonize in such a way that nothing really stands out. I mean, some things obviously have more visual importance than others, but nothing really bumps you visually when you're looking at it. I mean, it's like it all just feels quietly right and not jarring in a way.
We were talking. I was in a design conference, and we were talking about that thing where you just like take a single fabric, a single toile, and put it on everything, which feels maddening. Except at some point, there is a point in your mind's eye, in your eye's eye, where there's so much pattern that it goes away. And that's the place I like to play. I like when there's so much visual interest, but there's so much of it that it becomes
a neutral in a way.
The seat calms because you're not seeing that giant Brunswick floral on those two pillows on the back of the sofa, because there's other things that they're married with so easily.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I think I wonder if that kind of effect isn't a little challenging these days, because it's kind of a truism that things need to be integrated, and that a room or a home should really express something about the people who live there. And yet our visual lives are so saturated with imagery from designers and from influencers and social media and publications and TV and pretty much everywhere you go. Do you have any suggestions about how people might go about working out a style of their own that is comfortable for them and says something about their lives and isn't just a bunch of mismatched things that are culled from all of these diverse locations?
We're working on a new project for new clients up in upstate New York. In fact, we're going up to the house next week, and this is our first project together. They were a reference from another designer, so I don't know them well, and because we've had to be kind of separated from each other, we've not been able to do some of the usual, like sitting at lunch for 3 hours talking about their lives. From a technology point of view, I just like, do you want to build a Pinterest board for me? Which seems like the most kind of pedestrian way of going about this. But I love opening up the thing that used to be the manila file in the back of the file cabinet of all the things they torn out of magazines, and spreading them all out, which is all Pinterest actually is just an electronic version of that process. And I love seeing like, oh, you've picked out like 6 mirrored dressers. Do you like mirrored dressers? She's like, oh, I think I do. So sometimes it takes someone outside of your own brain to see concepts that you may be drawn to. But the other part of it is, and I mean this, and I feel this very deep in my soul, you know what you like. You may not be able to verbalize it. You may not have the language skills to talk about it, which is one of the challenges of design. Is some of it's a language issue.
Right.
But if I lay out 6 fabrics and you go, ooh, in front of the 5th one, that's what we're using. Because that's an immediate emotional, like, I love a non-expected verbal response.
Right.
Like, oh, that's like, now we may not use it on everything. We may not use that fabric, but it might just be a pillow. It might be the drapes. It might, God knows what it's going to be. But you love that. Someone asked me why I was so like fixated with tartan. I'm like, because I am. And when I see it, my heart beats faster. Now that's not true of a lot of people. And some of it's toile, and some of it's, barnwood and stainless. I don't know, whatever your shtick is. But I've always thought that you know what it is that you like. You just need to give yourself permission to embrace it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for people, and even for some designers, but not all, getting the analytical part of the brain involved in that process is a little difficult. Because I think, a lot of people, you mentioned the barnwood and stainless steel and stuff like that. A lot of what we've been seeing in recent years on Instagram has been these big, light, bright, fairly spacious rooms with not a whole lot of furniture, and there's reclaimed wood here and here and here,
right.
And there's gray herringbone tile and stuff like that. And I mean, those are all, a lot of them, are very, they have a wonderful sense of kind of calm and openness and serenity.
Right.
And I think people are attracted to that and they respond to that. But then
it's also easy, and not to belittle anyone's work, but like that, there's not a great deal of complexity to that. There are issues about furniture layout and floor plan and traffic flow and balancing the old and the new. I mean, there are aspects of it that are clearly beautifully done.
Right. But I think
no, but as a concept, that's digestible.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think the danger is that people will look at those, and again, particularly non-professionals, but it's just so people are so aware of style these days, and they will like the feel in a way, and will then focus on those particular elements as this is the way to make me feel like this. And so in order to do this, I too have to have reclaimed wood and, herringbone tile and blah, 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 rather than realizing that it's actually the aura that's really speaking to them, and that could be achieved in a lot of other ways that also mean something to them. And it doesn't have to just be a slavish imitation of this one look.
And unless your architecture matches the architecture in that picture, it's not the same room. if they've got great windows, if there's great ventilation,
Right.
if there's, you know, a series of framed openings that leads your eye through the house. You can't just, I mean, you can, but everything that's in this room right now would not be the same thing in a different room.
Right.
So
Many houses don't have nice windows like that. And, you know, having a differently proportioned wall with these little, you know, kind of like home builder windows in it is not going to give the same effect no matter what
right,
you do.
right.
Yeah.
I was watching a design show yesterday, which I will not name, and they must have used the word French country in describing this house. I'm like, that's not French country. That's American cottage with some distressed wood in it.
Right.
And the finished project was lovely. But I'm like, that's not like you use that, like it became, and God, we used to laugh at this at Ralph all the time, back to Mr. Lauren. But as we were working on home change often, you know, it was amazing how quickly, oh, that's a Wexford Hall. Like this thing that we had just seen 48 hours earlier was already adjectival at the warehouse. Oh, we need to get that. We need those. Like it was, I love that we would just create these descriptions of rooms that didn't mean anything to anyone but us.
Well, it gave you the gestalt that you were looking
And
for.
which is kind of, and we had to talk in so much kind of code and shorthand because there was so much to get done. That was often what we would do.
Yeah.
So, and we do that now. I like to think of our houses, especially as we're working on a big project. I like thinking like, what's the if and when this gets published, like what's the name of this? What's the name of this project? Is this about modern Southern? Is this about, you know, whatever? And it kind of helps as we're working in the office, you know, just like, oh, that doesn't fit into this concept, or that does fit into this concept. So,
right. It kind of helps you pull the coherence together, I suppose, in your own mind.
Right.
So, well, before we start to run out of time, I'll just ask, do any of our listeners have questions you would like to pose? I haven't seen any yet, but it's getting on in the hour, and we do need to stop before we run over into other people's time. So feel free to pop a question up to the Q&A. And while you're thinking about those questions, I will ask Scott, sort of now that you are ensconced in New York and are working in New England and are a little bit closer to the Scottish heritage in some ways,
I know,
through its colonial derivations. What do you see coming up in the future for Scot Meacham Wood Home, or Scot Meacham Wood Design, or Scot Meacham Wood the person?
Oh my God, the person! Why can't I get into that?
Well, we've been seeing your own house come together on Instagram over the past few months.
Yes, which has been fun. It's been fun having a new place to play with. After being in that same apartment in San Francisco for almost 25 years, that I could paint and re-wallpaper in my sleep. Now I have a whole new playground, a whole new sandbox to play in. I think one of the best things that came out of our quarantine was that I was just home all day, and we were working on our new fabric collection, which I've got some samples of here if we have a moment to share them. But it was great just to be able to, like,
this would be a perfect time for that.
So things that had this kind of gestation period of like 3 and 4 months to be able to get new strike-offs done, and I need like at least an hour and a half to sit and stare at this artwork for a while and figure out what I do and don't like about it. We were able to get that stuff done in 20 minutes because there was not a whole lot else going on. So I think the quickness with which we were able to get new product put together was great. So Scot Meacham at Home, textiles. This is actually, hold it up to the camera. Ooh. This is my family tartan. This is Gun Modern, which is the clan that's up near Aberdeen in Scotland. So this is my clan.
Nice.
And that's kind of where I was so excited, because you have no control over what this is going to look like when you start doing the research. It is what it is. I'm like, oh, thank God I like it. Thank God it's beautiful. I was so excited. I have a couple kills made out of this. I got a sport coat in this. But what I wanted to do, certainly with the tartans, is make it feel different.
Wow.
So this is one of my custom design. This is called Meacham. I like it so much I named it after me. But a much more modern and much more, again, colorful and impactful pattern than you might expect from traditional Highland colors, though they're all the exact same. Well, and the funny part is there's only at most of the Highland mills who are doing actually traditional Scottish, which is where we weave in the Scottish Highlands. And there's only about like 16 thread colors. Like it all happens out of a very limited palette. And the other fascinating thing is, if I can show this, like right here where those two colors cross, and it makes a third color, that actually happens on the surface of the fabric as we're weaving. So any place where a color interacts with another color, you're actually paletting a new color on that very spot. And that's a fun way to design fabric because it's very organic and it's very and the impact of what you're designing carries across the entire width and breadth of the fabric.
Right. Well, we do actually have a question.
Who wants to know something?
From BB Honan. With the layered traditional approach, how do you make it look updated? Are there patterns or embellishments that you should stay away from? Thanks, BZ.
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm kind of a fussy designer, and I have embraced that, and I'm at peace with it. So when I look back at old magazines from like the late 80s and early 90s, where there's just an ocean of details, and you can't see any of them, that feels dated to me. But I think if we can add a certain amount of detailing into a more traditional room, without just putting trim on every single pillow that you've got in there and face taping, and you just need to, it's a delicate, like it's not math, it's art. It's not science, it's art. So there's not a real specific way that we can talk about it that way. Is that vague enough? Did I even answer part of that question?
Well, BZ, you'll have to let us know if that was an adequate answer.
Yeah,
meanwhile,
is that helpful at all?
Seems to have been.
Oh, good.
And we do have one other question from X Wang, who is asking, is there any subtle Asian influence in your design given that you have lived there? Yes,
absolutely. I am a huge chinoiserie fan. I don't think like, this is one of our new fabrics. Which is based off an antique China pattern from China from the 1800s.
Right. So you kind of do Asian through the export trade pretty much, just because of the historically how it happened there, right?
Almost like Victorian Asian, Victorian chinoiserie, and Victorian Edwardian is one of my sweet spots in history. So absolutely. So we've got several toiles. We actually did one called Cordelia that's based on some antique fabrics that my mom had bought when we lived there. So there is absolutely, we have some aspects of that kind of come into the project, into the design projects.
That's cool. Well, I think given the time, I think that is going to pretty much have to wrap things up for us. So first of all, a very sincere thanks to Scot Meacham Wood for giving us the benefit of his expertise and thought today. And I want to thank all of you for attending and also for the questions. And special thanks once more to the Boston Design Week's organizers and the Cypress Group for making this morning's talk possible. And finally, on the screen, here's how you can get in touch with any of us with other questions or for other information. I hope you will follow Scot on Instagram because there's always lots of cool stuff there. And probably one of the continually longest running blogs that I know of that's still going on, The Adventures of Tartan Scot, which is at blogspot.com, which does still get updated, unlike many others on there. And with that, please enjoy some of the other Boston Design Week sessions that are happening today and tomorrow, and have a great rest of your Thursday. Take care.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.